Hi, this is Beth Miller at Paris House Woolworks, and I'm doing another tutorial video. The first one I did quite some time ago was about needle felting on your hooked piece, and that was so popular and has gotten a lot of views, so I decided that this time I would show you something that is actually equally simple, but I think really dresses up a piece and makes it a little bit more whimsical, which is adding beads or small gemstones or anything that you want to, just stitching it into your piece after it's finished. One example I have that I show my students quite often is this rosy maple moth that I designed and hooked. It's kind of whimsical in honor of these moths that I find hanging on the doors at the Paris house on a regular basis. And, you know, with this one, I used a lot of sari silk. I did wool applique with fly stitching for the antennae. I cut these loops right here so that we would have a fuzzy effect, because they really do have this adorable fuzzy little body. But I also, and I think you can kind of see it as I turn the piece here in the light, there are little amethyst chunks in the purple areas, and there are little pink glass beads in the wings. And I did this so that it would have just a little bit of sparkle and whimsy added to this art piece. I may still make a pillow out of this. I haven't decided yet. I've been just kind of having it in the shop as an art piece, but starting to think about making a pillow out of it. Anyway, what we're going to do today, just as an example, is we're going to bead the eyes on this pillow front. This is a pillow front that I make for Beekman 1802 in New York. If you go to beekman1802.com, you'll see all the different designs that I do for them. They're very fun to work with. I love making these for the Beekman neighbors, and I try to make them a little bit unusual. You can see this piece has novelty yarn on it, which gives it just a little bit of bling in the wings. But the other thing I always do with this design is I create the illusion of compound eyes on the bee. Some of you may know that I am a beekeeper, and this year my husband is going to join me as a beekeeper, which is really awesome because 2 beekeepers are definitely better than 1 in a household. And so I've observed these creatures pretty meticulously over the past, I'm going into my 3rd season, and it just seemed to me that creating a beaded eye on any bee design would kind of give you that insect compound eye sort of look. And it really is as simple as just stitching your beads, in any design that you want in between your individual loops. So I'm going to show you how that's done. I'm going to put the camera down a little bit so that it'll show my hands. And the first thing I want to show you is that I have glass beads. I like to use glass beads or gemstones rather than plastic. I'm just pouring some into my hand here so that they're easier to get than out of there. And I'm also going to put them in something of a contrasting color so I can really see them as I'm picking them up. Those of you who are younger can probably see anything, but I'm getting a little older now and bifocals. So anyway, I'm going to put these in a cup so that they're easy to use and pick up. Kind of tilt that down. And the reason I like glass beads over plastic is because I just think they have a longevity to them and a quality to them that is different than plastic. You know, we're hooking wool strip on linen, which is so durable. You know, these materials can literally last hundreds of years with good care. And so I think using the best materials you can for your beading as well is well worth it. There are bead shops all over the place and online, so you can find your gemstones and your glass and sometimes beautiful imported glasses. There's all kinds of things you can use to embellish your projects. Now, I also want to say that this piece is already steamed. It's obviously already steamed and serged. And that's when I like to put the beads on, because I feel like once the piece is steamed, the loops are set a little bit more permanently in the configuration that they're going to be. And because of that, I like to put affix the beads later so that they're not going to look different if I steam the piece afterwards. However, if you do decide to steam the piece afterwards, that's another reason to use glass or gemstone, because a plastic bead has an uncertain melting temperature. So, you know, your iron is set to wool when you're doing your steaming, and you get a plastic bead under there. I'm not 100% sure what would happen at that point. So, okay, so we're going to get right to it. I'm going to tilt this down so that you're seeing more of my hands. There they are. And I always use, you know, like, you don't need a real fine needle. Again, those of you who are getting older and your eyesight might be not the best, it's good to use a pretty good size needle. And I use a very, very strong thread for this. This particular thread I got, I think it must have come out of one of the main shoe factories. It's a nylon heavy thread, and I actually got this at a secondhand store. But you can find any heavy thread. This one is just particularly great for doing bindings, anything with hooked rugs where you're putting, you know, a certain amount of stress on the thread. So I'm just going to put my knot in it. Those of you who are accomplished hand sewers are probably cringing at the way I just made that knot, but that's how I do it. And I'm going to thread the needle. And I don't double it. It's not really necessary. And then here are my beads over here. And I'm just going to come up through one of the eyes in the first place where I want to put my bead. And make sure that the knot grabs. And then I'm just going to put my bead on the needle. This is harder than the threading. Oh, and you know what? You're going to need to use a needle that, this is a great thing that I just made this mistake. You need a needle that the eye will not be a problem. So, let's get a different one. I love it when I make mistakes in the middle of a video. It just kind of goes to show you that we're all human. That's my binding needle, and apparently the eye is too big. All right. So let's try this needle. And that goes over just beautifully. So we're going to set that right there. And then I'm going to go right back down in the same spot. I decided to nest it just between one of the loops. And there is our first one. And now I'm going to go over just a little bit to where I want to put the next one. And I'm going to do the same thing again. Now this is a pillow, and I'm not terribly worried about how the stitches look on the back. If you were worried about how the stitches look on the back, there's our second bead. What I would do is I would affix each of these individually. I don't think that's necessary on a pillow. I don't know that I even think it's necessary on an art piece or a wall hanging. So what I'm doing with my compound eyes here is I'm just kind of going around and attaching a bead in a kind of circular orientation. It adds a little work to every one of these, but at the same time, I think it adds a detail, a level of detail that makes it even more special. And it's black on black, but you can kind of start to see. We do have a bee design similar to this in the Paris House Woolworks shop. Of course, it doesn't have the 1802 on it. It's not quite as elaborate. But we do have this as a finished pillow. And as a pattern. I've had a couple of beekeepers hook bees that I've drawn for them, because we get quite attached to our hives and our bees. Sometimes the beads will want to turn on their sides. That can actually be okay if you want a variable texture of your beads as you're sewing them on, or you can just kind of tweak them as you're sewing them on. You want to have your thread too of a certain length so that you're not, you know, in the middle of your beading and you end up having to change your thread. So I think you get the idea. I am going to be going all the way around with this. I've got the first circle on. I'm going to go in concentric circles around the interior so that this entire eye and the other one will be completely covered with these little black beads and look like the compound eye of a bee. So if you have any questions on this, you can always reach me at parishousewoolworks@gmail.com, or you can visit the website at parishousewoolworks.com and contact us that way. Always look for the classes that we have. You know, I'm always teaching beginner dye class, beginner hooking. I'm teaching in other venues all the time. My next class coming up is at the Beekman 1802 Mercantile on March 3rd of 2018. You can sign up for that at beekman1802.com under events and experiences. All kinds of classes. I'm also going to be looking to have some guest teachers in as well. So I hope this was helpful. The next tutorial I plan to do is on how to do the stitching for a hooked pillow, how to actually sew the pieces together, because a lot of people run into a little trouble in that the first few times they do it, and it is so easy, just like everything else in hooking. Anyway, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time.